represent 4 straight years of spending reductions in the state of Florida, and we're very proud of that. But at the local level, which is where the property tax revenue goes, we've gone from local governments taking $32 billion in 2019 in taxes to now $60 billion. That's almost 100% increase in revenue. And look, part of it is people have moved here. Part of it is that property values have gone up. But homeowners need relief. And so it's my view that if you are a Florida resident and you have a homestead, we want that to be tax-free. And so that's our vision. That represents about 30% of the overall property tax revenue because they still tax investment property, commercial property. And so this ballot measure will do an opening salvo of raising it, the exemption to $250, adjusted for inflation, so they can't play games. That will be 60% of Florida homesteaders tax-free. Then as they raise it, the legislature will be able to raise that and have a process to do that. Once you get to 500,000 limit, that's 92% of homeowners, and then on it goes from there. But if we don't give homeowners relief, Maria, by 2032, they're going to be taking in $83 billion. So that would mean $32 billion in 2019. 13 years later, it goes to $83 billion. That is not sustainable. And so this is really a historic opportunity to have more money in people's pockets and to actually have their home be their private property that the government just can't use as a piggy bank. Residents as well. So it's good to be here. And we are today, the legislature is starting a special session on property taxes, which is something that I called, and we want to make sure that that we're doing everything we can to support Floridians. I mean, look, there's a lot that has gone on, particularly since COVID in Florida. There have been a lot of positive things. We've seen our economy. When I became governor, we had about a $1.1 trillion economy in Florida. Now it's about $1.85 trillion. And so that's a really, really significant increase in a 7+ year period. If you look at what we've been able to do, leading the nation in new business formations, great. If you look at all the tax relief we've done close to $10 billion in tax relief since I became governor. And just to put that in perspective, we were doing tax relief $1 billion, $1.5 billion, $2 billion. We even did $2.5 billion one year. Before I became governor, I don't think there was ever a time where they even did $1 billion in a single year. And so we were doing it in a variety of different ways to really benefit Floridians. Things like making things permanent, like baby items not being taxable. I mean, think about it. You have a kid, you don't pay tax on diapers now in Florida. That's a lot of money over, trust me, it's a lot of money. And all these different things. Back to school, permanent. You get what you want, no tax. Disaster response, year-round. Hopefully you don't need disaster supplies this year to actually use. We had a good year last year, and they, it's interesting. They'll say, every year, the worst ever is going to be. They always predict. And then a lot of times it doesn't end up being that. This is the first time where they've actually predicted maybe mild. That kind of worries me that they're predicting mild, because we've had a drought and supposedly, so I don't know. But bottom line is people be prepared. You have an ability to do that. We even did things like no tax or a 50% reduction in tolls for our commuters. Different parts of the state get hit differently, but there's some places like in Central Florida, you can't drive without hitting a toll if you really want to get around the region. And so that was very positive for a lot of people. We've also done things like not allow any increase in college tuition for Florida residents. So it's literally the same price that it was when I became governor, and it's the lowest by far in the United States of America. So that's a good thing as well. You don't have to go in debt to go to any of these things. We've also done things like Florida prepaid because we've held the line on tuition. Families have been paying into it, assuming that tuition was going to keep going up like everything else. That hasn't happened, so there was a surplus of money. So what did? We refunded the money to the parents. Like a lot of states would have spent that money, trust me. We refunded it, and it was good, and so we're happy to do that. There's been a whole host of other tax breaks that we've done that have been meaningful, including even our Second Amendment tax holiday, which went from I think it's September all the way to the end of the year. Last year, I think it's in the legislators' tax package again this year. But that's all accoutrements, ammo, firearms, camping supplies, hunting supply, all that stuff was all tax-free. And so there were a lot of people that benefited on that. And we've eliminated things like the business rent tax, which was tough for a lot of small businesses, and we liberated them from that. And we're really proud of all that. And there's been a lot of great things a lot of great story to tell. But part of being successful has meant that you've had population growth. There was a period of time where people from all around the country were buying homes at very high levels in Florida, sight unseen. It was just like they had to get out. I mean, they were being treated very poorly during COVID in a lot of these other areas, and it was not a good thing. And so you can understand people were making decisions, and you saw that, and that was a real serious rush. There was a lot of money that came into the state, but it did cause property values to go up, which can be a good thing. If you own a home and your home's now worth more, that's good. If you're somebody trying to afford a home, may not be so good. If you're somebody who has to purchase a new home for your job or whatever, you may be in a situation where you're having different tax bases. So there was a lot of things that happened with that. But one of the things that happened is, particularly for people that were buying homes during this period, the tax basis they were buying was just a lot higher than what it would have been if you did it, say in like 2009 or 2010 when the market was down. So we've seen a lot of different things with inflation throughout the U.S. economy. I mean, gas prices, unfortunately, are still high. We've seen a lot of different things, and we've done a lot of, like as the things I've outlined, to make it easier in Florida. But the reality is that the property tax has become a big burden for millions of people in the state. And fortunately, because we've had success, we have an ability to do something about it. And so that's what we're working with the legislature on as they're in the special session. And when you look at it, and I've said this many times, you kind of have the intellectual idea of what's the best thing to tax if you have to tax, and what's the worst thing to tax if you have to tax. And I think most people who look at this fairly believe that when you're taxing wealth or property, it's like you're taxing an unrealized gain every year. You buy your house, okay, you pay a sales fee, you pay taxes in that transaction, and then you keep getting taxed year after year after year, and sometimes more. Even with a homestead, it still can go up. And then if, heaven forbid, you end up in a different house, your tax basis can change dramatically, and all of a sudden you could be paying way more. In fact, I mean, if you move from if you bought a house in Hudson in 1990, and then you moved to Newport Richey in 2025, chances are you're paying a lot more in tax than you were. That's just the rate. So it creates a distortion. There's a lot of different issues with that, but it's something that's been very difficult for a lot of people to afford. And this is not just in Florida. You are seeing this phenomenon with the taxes as well as home insurance being such a big part of the monthly payment that you pay in for your mortgage, or it used to be principal and interest was the primary, and then the other things were ancillary but a lot smaller. Now that's actually a lot of times outstripped your principal and interest by these other costs. So the question is, can we do something about it? And so if we were starting from scratch and we were designing a tax system, I would not do any property tax. I don't think it's the right way to do it. I don't think it's the most efficient way to do it. And I think in some respects it's an involuntary tax. Whereas I know if I'm going to go buy a new car, that I'm going to pay a sales tax on that. And so you can use that to whether you want that car or not based on the tax. You can factor that in and make that decision. And so that's why I think some of the consumption would be better. But nevertheless, we are where we are. This has been something that's been in Florida for many, many decades. It's interesting. They haven't done a full homestead exemption increase since 1980. They raised it from 5 to 25. They've done partial exemption raises since 1980, but that was the first time they raised the exemption on everything, 5,000 to 25,000. That's a pretty big increase, right, for that period of time, and the voters approved that. But we haven't really seen anything like that since. So we're looking at it and say, okay, how much is property tax, how much were people being taxed for property in 2019, like right before COVID, and then now, and it's $32 billion in 2019 and $60 billion now. Now, you have had population growth and you have had inflation. But even if you account for that, it would not lead to 60 billion. So you've seen more revenue going in because of property tax than would be justified based on population growth and based on inflation, which you should account for. We account for it in the state budget, although I will say since 2019 till now, if you look at per capita inflation adjusted spending at the state level, we're actually less than we were in 2019. Nominally higher, in real dollars adjusted for population and inflation, we're lower. And in fact, the budget that I have right now, that I haven't gotten it yet, but I'm gonna get it probably within the next week or two. You get the budget, I've got to act on it, but the budget that the legislature passed is by the time it's $300 million more than we're spending current year, but I have line item veto, so I will veto more than 300. So that when I sign in the final product, that'll be the fourth straight year where Florida has reduced its budget at the state level. And so don't tell me this can't be done. We're doing it even while I'm doing the biggest environmental restoration in the history of the United States down in the Florida Everglades. Billions and billions of dollars we've done. It's been very successful, and the Trump administration's been great. They're actually delegating us projects. They're giving us the money. We're doing it quicker, all this stuff. It's a good story. We've done billions and billions of dollars in additional money for infrastructure, for roads and all these other things that are so important, and we're happy to do that. We've done money for more teacher salaries. In fact, this budget has another $200 million on top of what we asked for, so I think it's like $1.55 billion total, but there's $200 million just for teachers that have 10 years or more experience. Because, when we started this, we were trying to get the minimum up because you wanted to recruit teachers to get in because there was a lot of people that didn't want to do it. And I mean, if you had to watch kids on a cell phone all day, I mean, we took care of that issue too. But I mean, there's a lot of issues, right? So we did that, but then this one is only for that. And so we're happy to do that. And I've called for things like that a long time. So we're doing really big things, but yet still managing to have a very light footprint in terms of the government. We have the lowest number of state employees per capita in the United States of America. Now, go to some of these other states. The idea that you're getting better services in some like New York or some of these places than you're here, obviously you're not. I mean, let's just be clear. I wonder, you go around like New York City and you pay massive tolls. I mean, massive tolls if you pop from burr to burr. And so you could pay 40, 50, 60 bucks in a day by going through these tolls, but yet the roads are unbelievably bumpy, and now it's like, where does that money go, right? And so their budget in New York State is more than twice as large as Florida's budget. And we have millions of more people than they do. Their budget's almost $270 billion. Budget I'll sign will be somewhere between, I don't know, $115 and $117 billion. And that's pretty much where it's been stable for the last 4 years. So you do need to, and look, we've had a gusher of money come in the state too. Let's just be clear. We're not the only ones that have had. We've done a lot of tax cuts, as I mentioned. We've also been able to reduce the amount of debt that Florida has. For its entire history, we've reduced it by 50% just during my administration. We even did an accelerated debt repayment program that the legislature provided us so we could buy the debt back, the bonds at a discount on the open market, retire them, and then you save on both principal and interest. And that saved $1 billion or $2 billion over the course of that project. That's all really, really good, and we're proud of it. And so we're showing it can be done. It can be done. And so as we look at a property tax, though, the reality is this has been the way things have been done for many, many decades. And so I never promised that we would simply have no property tax anywhere at any time, because if I was starting from scratch, that's what I would propose. But since we're starting with what we have, I've always said we're going to focus on homesteaded properties. Now, Florida has always treated homestead differently. They've had these exemptions. That why should you have homestead versus this or that? Because that's what Florida Constitution has in it now. That's how we've done it to where you've done a distinction between the property that's your primary residence that you choose to be homesteaded in versus a second home, investment properties, commercial properties, all these other things. So that's why we're doing it in terms of the proposal for the homestead. So what is homestead? I think some people are being very dishonest in some of the stuff I'm saying to say that, they're not going to get any revenue from property tax if we do a property tax plan. Well, first of all, homestead is about 30% of all the revenue for property tax that local governments take in. But they also take in a lot more money than that. Let's just be clear. I mean, you look at some of these counties. I mean, I was posting some of this this morning on online. But in 2018, Hillsborough County, for example, was about $850 million for their property tax revenue going into the county. Now it's about $1.6 billion. And so, that's almost doubling in this intervening period. And if left on current trajectory, it will go from $850 million in 2018 to $2.4 billion in 2031. Again, that's just property tax. That's all property tax revenue: commercial, non-homestead residential, investment properties, all that stuff. That's where they're at. But that property tax is still just a portion of their overall taxes that are going into the county budget. So you're talking about homestead, which is a fraction of all property tax revenue, but that property tax revenue is simply a piece of an overall thing. And in places like Hillsborough, Broward, they get a lot more revenue from other things all in when you look at how they do their operations. And so looking at the growth of the revenue, looking at focusing on homestead, I'm like, yeah, of course we can do this. Of course we can. Don't let anyone tell you you can't. So if we were to do so, but I also understand that we have to do something that the legislature would be willing to put on the ballot and that voters will vote for. Now, anytime you do anything that benefits taxpayers, you're going to have people come out of the woodwork saying, oh, you're not going to have any more police, you're not going to have any more schools, you're not going to have any more of that. Now, obviously, that's not true. Did Hillsborough County have police and fire in 2018 when they were getting $850 million in property tax revenue? Yeah, they had all those things. What would that mean? Would they not be able to do it if they ended up with just $1.42 billion in 2028? Still almost a 100% increase. Would somehow of course they would be able to do it. And yes, costs have gone up, but you're talking about almost doubling of the revenue in many of these situations. Broward County is interesting. 1.1 billion property tax revenue in 2018. 2025, 1.8 billion, but they only had a 3% population increase on net over that intervening period. So, you're having about a 70-80% budget property tax revenue increase going in for only 3%. And if left unabated, they're going to end up with 2.5 billion taken from taxpayers for property taxes in 2031. That's a lot, right? That's a lot going forward. So we focused on the homestead. We understand it's important. Now, if you just eliminated every homestead property from being taxed on day one, like I said, it would be about 30% of the revenue that would be gone. Just to put that in perspective, though, it isn't like that's taking you back 40 years. It takes you back like 4 years from what the revenue was going in across the state of Florida for local governments. Even if you just did that on day one and had no fund, which we're providing to give, you would be able to do it at levels that were being spent in 2022, 23, 2024. That's just the reality of the situation. Nevertheless, we have to work with folks to get it on the ballot and do all this other stuff. And so what we said we're going to do is, okay, you're going to have to do it in stages. But the first one is we're going to raise homestead exemption for everyone for $250,000 tax-free. And that's the opening salvo that you're going to do. Now, what does that mean? Well, I mentioned Broward. That's 51.8% of all homesteaded residential properties in Broward would be off the tax rolls entirely. Obviously, anyone with a value higher than that is still getting the exemption. So if you're 500 you're going to get that exemption. Going to be really, really significant to be able to do. But that's a massive amount of folks that are going to have this major lifeline where they're not going to have to worry about doing that anymore. Hillsborough, 61.2%. Pasco, 65.2% in terms of the people that would benefit. That's just the initial. You're going to have the legislature working over many years, hopefully not many years, but certainly they'll be able to do where they can implement it over many years, where you'll be able to get even more relief. So that's something that's really significant. My question is there anything else that can be proposed that would actually deliver thousands of dollars of savings every single year to taxpayers? Is there anything you've seen proposed in the city councils, the county commission, the state legislature, anywhere else where you would realize that type of savings? I haven't seen it. So if you're looking at helping people afford to be able to live and to be able to prosper, the property tax is the best game in town to be able to help with that. So that's why it's going on the homestead, focusing on that, and that's why it's going to a phased approach where you're going to be able to do that. So just understand, if you do the proposal, and look, the legislature's in session. I mean, maybe they have other ideas and can do it. Would even be better for you guys, and I'm all ears on that. But if you do what they were talking about, so Hillsborough County in 2028, their property tax revenue would be $1.41 billion. Again, in 2018, they were getting $850 billion. That's with this plan passing and being enacted. They would go from $855 to $1.4 billion. So that, again, that's close to doubling in that 10-year period. That's where you would end up. We have had inflation. We've had population growth. They've had 8% population growth. We've not doubled. The costs have not doubled for all this stuff over this period of time. The inflation is, it's significant, but there you go. So that's just that. So that takes them back to spending levels from 2 years ago for property tax revenue. That's what that would do. So anytime anyone tells you, oh my gosh, not going to be able to fund anything, good luck. They're going to disband the sheriff's department. We're going to have to disband police, all this stuff. Obviously, that's not true because they didn't disband it in 2024 when they were taking in a similar amount. So the whole notion of this is that it's doable, and that's the thing. Like, some people will ask me, why didn't you just get rid of every property? Because first of all, the legislature wouldn't do it. Second of all, you'd have to propose new taxes, and I don't want new taxes. All this other stuff. So that's where we're at just for that. But we are proposing because we have a big surplus at the state. We're proposing a big trust fund so that we can help with grants in many situations which may need. And look, every tax base in Florida is not the same. Miami, come on, they've got a massive tax base. I mean, let's just be real. You're helping homesteaded people in Miami-Dade County, and they're going to have a lot of opportunities for revenue. They already get a lot of money for revenue. Same thing with a lot of our major centers. There's just a lot going on that's very positive, and I think that's great, and they think that they should take advantage of that. Then you have rural. So we have 32 fiscally constrained counties. You could give them money to do all the homestead that they would, quote, lose. Although I don't like this idea of government's losing revenue. It's not their money, it's your money, okay? Government is not taking as much. You're getting constitutional protection for your property. That's a good thing, and we got to see it through the lens of the taxpayer and the homeowner. But nevertheless, you have some rural, it's budget dust to give them grants. I mean, I put it in my budget. I knew it wasn't going to get taken up because this wasn't ripe yet, but it just as a show of good faith. I'm like, yeah, look, if that's going to keep some of these folks from not wanting to support it, because, the legislature, we have legislators that represent rural. It's like, fine, we'll help rural. That's no problem. Then you have other parts, more bedroom communities, and I would say Pasco would be one of those. Pasco's had massive growth. I think you guys have had 25% population growth since 2018. But, you've also seen a big increase in property tax revenue. I mean, it was $250 million, $251 million in 2018, and now it's $609 million currently. in terms of what came in for property tax revenue. And so, look, when you have 25% increase in population and inflation, you are going to go up from 250. I get that. Even if you don't raise millage, just I understand that. But I think that there's absolutely room. But, some of the bedroom communities may not have as much non-homestead, may not have as much commercial, and may not have other taxing sources that they're getting a lot of money from. These other places are getting a lot of money, and they have more than what they need anyways. So we can do grants, and I'm happy to do that. The Florida legislature last year voted to put something on the ballot which would have required us. So we have a maxed out rainy day fund in Florida. We're not allowed constitutionally to put anything more. It's quadrupled since I became governor. We had about $1.6 billion in it. Now I think we're $5.7 billion or something like that. I mean, it's gone up. It's great. If there's a downturn, and there will be an economic downturn at some point, economy's cyclical, that's why we did this, then you're able to take from there, plug whatever holes you have in the budget, and then you're great, right? You will not, as long as people are behaving responsibly who get elected, you are not going to have to raise anybody's tax at the state level because we have that rainy day fund. Well, they passed the measure, and it's not going to pass on the ballot because it's not worded well. It's also just not, I don't think it's great policy, but basically they said, they want to do even more rainy day fund, and so they want to put $750 million a year in until it reaches like $13 billion to just kind of sit there and do nothing. First of all, you want to run modest surpluses, you want to have some rainy day, but you don't want to have too much in government coffers because that means people are being overtaxed. So I say they've already agreed to put aside all this money. Rather than have it sit there, we can use that money to help with this property tax transition. There's more than enough money there. It will be very meaningful for a lot of people, and you're going to be able to do all these things and do them very, very well. Now, some people will say, we like that. We think it's really, really good. But they say you're going to bankrupt local government. I think if you look at the figures, you can see there's not going to be a single local government that's going to be, certainly worse off than they were 5 or 6 years ago on this. Even if we don't do the fund, we are doing the fund, but I'm saying even putting aside the fund, you're going to be okay. You're going to be able to make it work. And so the question is, do we want to really bend over backwards to help homeowners and taxpayers, especially given, look, I wish I could just say tomorrow gas is going to be $2 a gallon, right? But it's a global issue. So you play the cards you're dealt. This is something that I think could be meaningful. So I don't think it's credible on the local services, especially because some of the areas that have maybe not as robust tax bases, we're setting aside money, we're willing to do that, and it's going to be very, very meaningful for a lot of people. We also, in terms of some people say, you're not going to have schools. Well, the state of Florida, in my tenure, we've taken on more of the burden for school districts than before I was governor, increasing percentages. We've increased funding every year for them. But, you have some of these school districts that have had a decline in student population, and yet they've had massive, massive increases in the amount of money. And here's what frustrates me. We created in the state budget during my administration, so Florida, it's very complicated how education's done, but we send a lot of money, school districts have money, and then they do. We do a lot of it. But we send the money down and then the school district spend it. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Why is that not going to teachers? Because people talk about teachers. So we created a fund, only could be used for teacher pay. That's the only thing it could be used for. And I think what happened was we sent it, and a lot of school districts, fine, they used our money. First of all, they used it for leverage for other things with like the school unions, but they would do, but then they wouldn't do any additional on top. That's probably true for most of the school districts, but what happened during that time, you have like Broward, massive increase in the school district, big decrease in student population. Where is the money go? It's going to bureaucracy. It's going to administrative. And my view is like, we don't need more bureaucracy at administrative. You could really reduce that and do much better by the teachers. That's for sure. But we do shoulder a lot of the burden, and we will continue to help with that, as we go forward for all this other stuff. We've also done very, very strong on law enforcement since I've been governor. No one's put more money in for that and we'll continue to be supportive of that. Some people say, oh, they're gonna jack up costs on business. What we propose actually reduces the ability of local government to increase assessments on business. Now they can do 10% in a year. The proposal cuts it to where 5 is the cap that they would be able to do. So that's really strong protection, better than current law. But I also just know you don't want to kill the golden goose, right? I mean, having businesses is good. That creates a lot of tax revenue, and not just by business paying property tax. People coming in, they pay sales tax when they purchase things. More jobs are there. More people are contributing to the economy. So I don't think that there would be a great incentive to do that anyways, but nevertheless, there's protection against that being proposed that is as strong as we've ever done. Some people have tried to say that this is more targeted towards wealthy homeowners. I don't know where you get that. You're talking about a revolutionary benefit for people that have homes that are valued $250,000 or less, not the people that have $25 million. The people that are in the middle of that, above 250 but less, they're getting a massive exemption, and that's just the beginning. We want to get all of them. And once you get to 500 for the homestead exemption, that's 92% of homeowners in Florida. And some people say, oh, well, they'll just raise the assessments to get ahead of the limit. It's adjusted for inflation. Of course it's adjusted for inflation. Why would you do it if you're not adjusting it for inflation? Anyone that says, oh, at 250 in 10 years it's going to be worth nothing, no, it's going to be worth the exact same that it is today, and that will go up nominally as the inflation rate. If the inflation rate continues to go up, it will absolutely reflect that going forward. So there's a lot of things that people will say. Oh, and then finally, they'll say, well, you could do, that's great, but then local government, they're never going to stop spending. They're going to keep doing that. So when this is implemented, what we're going to work with the legislature on is similar to like what Colorado did with, there's like a taxpayer bill of rights, where you set the level of whatever you want to tag as the baseline, and then you say, okay, inflation, population growth, and that's the limit on spending. I would allow them to spend more on teachers and police and that, but that's pretty narrow. But the rest would have to stay in line with that. Once you do that, you are not going to even have a need. You're not going to be able to spend the money if you try to tax people more. So just understand, there's a lot of support in the legislature for making sure, as this lands, if it lands positively in November, as you go in those last 2 months of the year, we'll be working together to kind of implement the plan statutorily, because you can't do it all in the Constitution. Absolutely, you're going to have a taxpayer bill of rights as part of that. Absolutely, you are going to have, I think, really strong limits on what can be spent or not spent, and that's really, really positive. So all in all, the legislature's got a great opportunity. I know a lot of people are very, very excited about it. I know a lot of their constituents are very, very excited about it, and I would just tell them, do stand up for your folks and taxpayers. We know that being able to afford just daily American life now is different than it was maybe 10 years ago, and it's tough. So what can we do? Well, this is something that we can do. We control it. We, the people here in this state, control it. The legislature can give the folks the ability to vote on it. The vote can come back positive, and then that will be implemented in a way that'll really change lives, I think, in a positive way. And just think about also what it does to the economy. I mean, you say you have somebody that's got another $2,300 in their pocket, somebody that may have an extra, $41,000 or $4,100 in some of these instances. You're looking at major contributions to the economy. Maybe some people will save, but that's not a bad thing either, but you're going to have big time. So it's going to help the economic base, and I think it's going to go well. So I'm excited for it. I know they're going to be in this week, and I know that they've been working very hard over the weekend and everything. And people are like, why didn't you do it before? Why didn't you do it before? Because the reality is it does require kind of your undivided attention when you're talking about throwing it into the briar patch of the regular legislative session when they have 100 other things in the air. I don't think that would have been the best way to do it. There may be things in terms of what we announced last week that they may want to tweak here or there. We're not going to support anything that's not good for taxpayers, but but you got to have attention on it. So I wanted to make sure the budget was done. I wanted to make sure all this was ready so that we would be able to really look at it strongly and give the voters an opportunity to do something really, really significant. And look, we have a big tax base. We've got a lot of different the property tax, as I mentioned at the top, is a fraction of what particularly some of the larger counties are taking in. They're taking in a lot of other money from a lot of other sources. And many of the sources, quite frankly, and I think smartly, are not Floridians, right? You have people that come and visit, some have second homes, all that stuff. That's fine. I'm all for relieving the burden on Floridians as much as possible. So I want to thank everybody that's been involved with it. I know we've got our sheriff here who's supportive of the taxpayers here, and I think he realizes that this is something that can be meaningful for a lot of the people he's been elected to serve and serve very ably over these many years. So Sheriff, come on up.
Thank you, Governor. I appreciate it, everybody. So it's interesting. There's patterns in life, and history repeats itself. So that's what I want to kind of start off with, and the fact that, you know, our governor has been a leader. And if you always listen to saying, because that is what everyone else is doing. That's what everyone else is doing. If you're a parent, you always heard that. That's what everyone else is doing. Well, I can tell you we're blessed to have a governor who has a backbone. Because if we did what everybody else is doing, things would not be as good as they are in Florida. And the one thing is, because of his bold initiatives, Florida's better. And this is just one of those bold initiatives. So think about COVID. If during COVID we followed what everybody else did, we would have had 2 years of wearing masks. Kids would have been out of school for years. Businesses would have been shut down. It would have been horrible. But instead, kids went to school. It helped prevent mental health issues. Businesses were able to sustain themselves. And the other one, too, is the leaders that were shutting down other states had a place to vacation. They came to Florida. So you provide them a vacation spot. He protected female athletes. You know, whether it's our daughters, our granddaughters, our nieces, he protected them. Thank you. States like New Jersey, California, Oregon, it's still a mess. And female athletes aren't getting the ability to compete because they're allowing boys to play female sports, and that is horrible and it's wrong. He protected public safety, and that's near and dear to my heart and to the many women and men in this organization. Had Governor DeSantis followed what everybody else would have done, there would have been sanctions against law enforcement, and crime would have risen in Florida. But what happened? He stood by us. He had a backbone. People across the country were criticizing him, but he stood with us. And because of that, you know, he didn't follow the woke agenda. He stood with law enforcement. He made our community safer, and that's why people moved to Florida. And now we see with taxes. There are places across this country that talk about and contemplating tax increases, but not Governor DeSantis. He's making sure he's going to do the opposite. And that's what the pattern's been. He's done the opposite. And every time he's done the opposite, he succeeded. And that's why I stand with him, and that's why I support him, because I know he's going to succeed one more time. Just think about how many people are struggling right now. Can you go to the supermarket if you have a family and not spend more than $100? There's no way. You know, parents right now are struggling with extracurricular activities. What do we spend money on? You know, if Tommy wants to do that or Susie wants to do something else, they're making these tough decisions. You know, if the car breaks down, they're deciding, well, do I need to fix this or not? I mean, that's horrible to have to make those decisions. And then especially on mortgages and car payments. Those are the things. People are struggling, they're frustrated, and they're scared right now. And it's my opinion that the stress is causing issues. The financial issues are causing problems in families. Whether it's domestic disputes or violence, drug use, or mental health issues, you know, there's issues that are going on in the families right now because there's family stress over money. You know, there's no statistics right now that are out there doing this. You know, it's going to happen a couple years from now. Colleges are always behind. The studies are always behind. But at the same time, as common sense and experience tell us that. You know, the other one, too, is the Pasco Sheriff's Office handles over 1,000 domestics a month. You know, and we know that 45 to 55% of those domestics are not reported. But I can tell you, from my experience, when there's stress in the household, it leads to issues. And whether it's runaway kids, whether it's parents fighting, there's a direct correlation with that. Now, I appreciate the governor's putting this out there for our citizens. That's the most important thing. The good thing about the state of Florida is that we still believe the citizens are the ones who make a decision. And in one form or another, the citizens need financial help. The average Floridian is struggling right now, and they're making tough decisions about finances. And if Floridians are making tough decisions about finances, so should government. Now is the time to be innovative and not be afraid to cut our own path. local government needs to take action and modernize government services. If during that time somebody says, because that's the way it's always been done, if there's a bureaucrat who's afraid to make change, they need to be thrown out of office. Because the whole thing is they forget about that struggling senior citizen who can't make it day to day. They forget about that single mother who can't even put food on the table. If government forgets about them, we have failed because we're no longer for the people. The other one too is, if government is out there saying that they can't do this, they can't find money, well, there's somebody named Blaise Ngolia. He's our chief financial officer. So I tell everybody, if ever a government official says, I can't find any money in my budget to find it, please call our chief financial officer, Blaise Ngolia. Blaise will be more than happy to come in. It's amazing how many people are afraid of Blaise coming in, but now he's here to help. A wise person once said that during a storm, besides the constitutional officers, you know what is most needed in government. Think about it. During a storm is when you most know who's needed for government, whether it's law enforcement, fire rescue, public works. Those are the things that are most necessary. And that's why when we're making decisions, it's easy to realize what has been waste and what over that time the governor is talking about since 2018 to 2026 with all this money people can always spend and create different programs. Well, maybe it's not the time that we need those programs because our citizens need the money in their pockets more. We also know the lessons from our post-storms and local governments. Some of them have been a burden on our citizens. And I've talked to local officials and they said some local governments, and in particular some municipalities, have caused more issues than helping. Well, maybe it's a time that counties and municipalities sit down at the table and say, how do we fix this? And if it's causing a problem, we get rid of it. And that's how we save money. It's not a bad thing to make government more efficient. Eliminating duplication of services, consolidating, breaking down silos, to make citizens safer, to make government more efficient, and save taxpayer dollars. Small businesses do it all the time. Small businesses every day are finding a way to save $1. It's called process improvement. Government should be doing that daily too, and especially now. And instead of saying the sky is falling, we should be looking for solutions. This is when leadership stands up. This is when people like Governor DeSantis is standing up for our people, and that's when every elected official in the state of Florida needs to stand up and say, we need to find solutions. We don't need to sit there and say, we can't do this. And yes, there's an opportunity to evaluate how state government plays in this too, with local municipalities and county. This is when all government needs to come together. With the advancement of technology, there is no reason why government should not be more efficient. But it takes courage, it takes innovation, and a desire to improve. And that is how we provide our citizens relief. That is how we draw more businesses to the state of Florida. And that is how Florida will remain the best state in the union. So thank you, Governor, again for your leadership. I stand with you. And I always say this, as I said, and I started with, there are patterns in life and history repeats itself. The governor has made very tough decisions over the time he's been our governor. We've been absolutely blessed by God to have him. Here's another tough decision, and he will be right again. Thank you, Mr. Governor. That's it. Thank you.
Well, great job, Sheriff, and I know you're going to be moving on. I don't know if the Florida legislature is quite greener pastures. I guess it depends on where you sit, but I know you're going to be really good, and you got my full support to be the next senator from here, so good luck to you. And then do you have someone in mind for your replacement? Because I'm going to have to do that once you get... Okay, all right, good. All right, well, we'll cross that bridge after November, but I appreciate the sheriff weighing in on this. And look, I want people to be able to be successful in this state. I want them to be able to make the most of their own God-given talents. I want to be able to afford a home, raise a family, retire with dignity, all these different things. And this is the best way that I've seen to be able to do something that is going to be really, really meaningful, not just for homeowners now, but as we go into future generations, people growing up in Florida, or even people that are here. I mean, we understand the state's in flux. They're going to be able to know that they can realize that dream of home ownership, and if that's their homesteaded property, that they're going to have some constitutional protection on that. And that's really, really meaningful, and I don't think there's any other state that's able to do that. We are able to do it, partially because I think we've managed things well at the state level, but also because we have so many people that come here to visit and to vacation and to live half the year. And so that means less taxes for Floridians. It certainly has meant that at the state level, but I think that should also be the case at the local level as well. So, okay, well, we'll hopefully see the legislature act positively this week, and then you guys can just set your clock to November and just try to count the many times where media tries to say you're not going to have access to any services if this passes, because they're going to say it nonstop. All right, anyone have any questions back there?
I wanted to ask whether you're at all concerned about the potential for more difficulty in the paying for a raised stadium, given this potential cut in revenue that local governments could face.
Actually, the proposal for the mixed-use center would be a big generator for property tax revenue, because you can still tax commercial properties. You're going to have people that may buy a condo and live there half the year. You can still tax them. So it's actually going to be the raised stadium would be a reason. Probably this proposal would be more of a reason to want to do it, because it would expand their tax base, and you're not going to have homestead property on that raised stadium. I mean, you're going to have businesses, and that's going to be fine. I don't think they should be taxed at high levels. That's why we have the protections. Don't get me wrong. But when new businesses come on under this proposal, they'll be able to pay property taxes, and I think that'll probably be a good thing. But let's just be clear, Hillsborough, 2018 they taxed property at $855 million. This most recent year, 2025, it was $1.6 billion. So then they're going to not continue to go up. So it's projected to go to 2.4 billion by 2031, and instead it will still be way more than twice as much as it was in 2018, but it's just going to increase at a smaller level after the initial. So they're going to have a lot of money. But I do think from a tax perspective, the fact that this could pass from the voters, to me, that would be more reason why I'd want to make sure. And the thing is about that site, I mean, have you guys seen that site where Hillsborough College is? If you've gone to a Bucks game, it's right across the street. You have Steinbrenner there. And I think Steinbrenner's really good, but the campus needs love, and that needs a reimagining. But then there's just a lot of parking lot and a lot of stuff there. And the question is, what would that value of that property be commercially or from a tax perspective? And other than this proposal, it would almost certainly be very little, because you wouldn't build homes there. No, not at all. You wouldn't be able to just build apartments. It's not a good place for that, just without anything else around it. You wouldn't put a lot of commercial or office space. Having the ballpark and everything else around it gives you an ability to really utilize that property in a way that's going to be good. So that will produce tax revenue. There's no question. That'll be helpful for all this stuff going forward. No question. But at the same time, it's like, even if they didn't have that potential option where this development would lead to more tax revenue and a better tax base, they still have the room to be able to help these property owners, the homestead in Florida. And again, just the initial proposal for that initial raise, once you do the 250, in Hillsborough, that's 61% of homestead property owners in there that are relieved of the burden. And that's a good thing. I think that's really positive. And so they're going to be more likely to go spend money at a Bucks game or a Rays game or a Lightning or some of this stuff, or go out to eat. Although I agree with Chris on the supermarkets and stuff. And I mean, I've got three young kids, and it's painful taking them through the drive-through. I mean, man, it's like you used to be able to do it. And granted, anything that, I mean, first of all, McDonald's is very smart with these Happy Meals and the toys. I mean, because that's what they want. But you go through, and some of them, they had the one that they wanted, Hunt Tricks. I think it was like $10, $12 a pop. So I've got three, and so we're ending up close to $40 all in with everything, just going through there. And I'm like, man, it used to be you do that for $4 or $5 or whatnot. And then, I have my youngest. I was like, are you going to eat it? Yes. And I know she's not going to eat it, but she wants the toy. So we end up doing it, and she does some. She maybe eat a fry or two, won't eat the nuggets. I tell her eat the nuggets, and then that whatever. My son will eat it all. My other daughter will eat most of it, but my youngest, she just doesn't do. So I'm out that, and what am I going to do with the Huntrix meal, right? She takes the toy, and I got it. But the pinch is, but I totally get. I see it every day too. Even as governor, I see it, and that's something that incomes have not gone up. Now mine, so my salary, when they've raised the government, I always say leave the governor out. So I don't want anything more. My job's to serve. That's what it is. But other people, have had maybe increase, but not enough to keep up with inflation over the last 4 or 5 years. I think that's really been the problem. I mean, inflation's bad, but when you have really strong incomes, sometimes it can eclipse that, but that's just not really what's happened, certainly since the COVID-19 pandemic. And so that's created this need to really look out as much as we can for how people can make ends meet.
Governor, when it comes to this conversation about relief for property owners, previously we talked about non-school related taxes. Today you touched on schools a little bit. Why the shift? Why now impacting schools as well?
I've not shifted. I mean, my view is a property owner is just looking how much they're paying. They're not looking at which streams are going to. They're looking at what's my exemption, how much money am I going to save? And so my view has been that you want a homestead exemption that just applies to everything. I mean, you own your home or you don't own your home, right? And that's where we've gone. Now I know the legislature the House passed one which did not apply, that only applied to some of the homestead taxes. It eliminated it on day one for everyone other than the strand, so basically about 70%. I don't think that the Senate was willing to take that up. I don't know, maybe they were or whatnot, so I'm not sure there. But that was kind of their thing. I know that's a lot of you in the legislature in terms of how they want to do it. But I've just looked at the numbers, and we're going to probably change how the school districts are financed because we have this FEFP. I think that there's interest in doing a rewrite. I won't be the one doing it, but I do think that you're going to see that either on this tax commission that comes up at the beginning of next year that will put stuff on the ballot for voters in 2028, most likely. Maybe before, I don't know what the mechanisms are. I think there is a desire to do that, but you want that? We have money that we're putting aside, so we can give money to school district. Now it's some of these districts that have had big, like I mentioned, Broward, big decline in student population and then a massive increase in administrative. To me, I think that they should curtail their administrative expenses and costs. I really do. I don't think that money is going to the student and whatnot, but nevertheless, that's part of the reason why we created this trust fund to be able to help. We've already been shouldering more and more of the burden for education, K-12, compared to the locals. And don't forget, our school choice program is 100% funded by the state. The locals don't contribute anything to that. And that's been really revolutionary for hundreds of thousands of families. And we're proud of that. So the initial proposal that they did not have any money to help with local expenses. What I'm proposing will do that. And so, if you have Pasco County Schools, hey, we're going to need this. Okay, fine. I'll do it. They've already voted to put aside massive amounts of money to just sit in the kitty above and beyond our rainy day fund. So my view would be we'll take that and do it. And what happens is, you have, quote, decline, in revenue, but then, you start to see how the economy responds. You are going to continue to see non-Floridians that are going to buy homes and continue to pay. You do that. So you end up in I think, a really good spot very, very quickly. But we're here to help on that. That's why we put the trust fund. We think it's important to do. We obviously have resources. And notice, we didn't do major tax this year. The legislature didn't do. And part of it was just because I think we would rather use that to help with your property tax situation. That to me is the easiest thing to do. So those are also, there are differences, but I do think you will have some who will say that, some streams of tax, but not other streams of tax. And, the reality is that's just less relief that the homeowner is ultimately going to get, especially when you have ways to fund this stuff that I think could be positive anyways.
Governor, on the governor's race right now, I wanted to ask if the polls have not moved a whole lot over the last few months.
Look, I'm frying these fish. I mean, people will ask me political questions, and I respect that, but at the same time, I'm not getting into any political until I really get this down. I mean, you know, Chris came up as helping me, so that's an easy thing for me to do here. But generally speaking, you know, we're not going to be involved. We got to land on property tax. We got to get it on the ballot. I know there's a lot of folks. I'm assuming that people that are running for these offices are going to be supportive of helping out their homeowners, because I think people need relief. And so I'd anticipate you see, you know, those folks that are running for various offices are going to be supportive of this. Okay, well, thanks everybody. Appreciate it. God bless you.